Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on tips for reopening your business. Before I begin, I would like to read a disclaimer. This communication is not intended to provide any legal advice or opinion on any individual situation and should not be relied on to determine insurance coverage or lack thereof as it relates to coronavirus. We encourage our listeners to reach out to their broker and legal counsel if you have questions following this presentation. Our topic for today is tips for reopening your business. The meeting objectives are setting expectations. We'll talk about face coverings, mitigation strategies, and compliance. Californians have been asked to stay home in order to save lives. This was in effect on March 19th of this year. California is soon moving into stage 2, where more businesses are opening and in operation. Setting expectations is important, and it's important to do so early on. We encourage our clients to establish a no personal contact rule. This includes limiting handshaking, closing open space meetings, and limiting physical contact in general from employee to coworkers. We also encourage a no item sharing rule. This means employees are not sharing tools, office supplies, or computers. We want to also encourage you to create a prominent hand sanitizing regimen by providing hand sanitizing stations throughout your place of business and making them readily available for your employees. The CDC recommends, if you're using sanitizer, to use sanitizer with 60% alcohol or more. Equipment cleaning rules are also important, and we need to establish a schedule and the expectations early on. We need to teach employees to clean commonly used tools or machines such as copy machines, tooling, and other industrial specific tools that they need for their job. We recommend posting clear directions on how to clean equipment adequately. We also want to encourage you to break the 9 to 5, change schedules, stagger work days, ask your employees to work a weekend and then give them 2 days off during the week. These are just some ideas you can implement. We want to encourage you to make sure that you are not exceeding the allotted capacity for your building. CDC rules remain in effect. If you visit the CDC website at cdc.gov/coronavirus, you will find printable material that you can print and post at your place of business. The 6-foot rule remains, and they recommend physical distancing from coworker to coworker. The CDC also recommends that employees cover, cough, or sneeze with a tissue, and that tissue is tossed in the trash and hands are washed. The CDC is also recommending that folks wear face coverings when at work. They also recommend to not touch your eyes, nose, or mouth, and we need to encourage employees to not do that. They also encourage employers to clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces. And as previously discussed, we want to make sure that employees stay home whenever they feel ill and that they're calling their doctor so that they receive the proper medical care. Last but not least, we want to remind you to wash your hands and encourage your employees to wash their hands for a minimum of 20 seconds. This information, again, can be found on the CDC website at cdc.gov/coronavirus. Personal protective equipment. In the safety world, there is a very commonly used risk assessment strategy called a risk mitigation hierarchy. This involves eliminating, substituting, engineering, or providing administrative controls or PPE to eliminate a hazard. As we look at COVID-19, we're trying to prevent the transmission of infection. So if we can do so, we want to physically eliminate a hazard from the workplace. If we need to, we're going to substitute the hazard and replace it with a better position for an employee and a better procedure for an employee to follow. We also can implement engineering controls. This means that we will isolate people from the hazard. Administrative controls also come into play. This is procedure changes, employee training, and the installation of signs and warning labels to remind employees to what they are required to do and what the expectation is from a prevention standpoint. And last but not least, we have PPE, which protects the worker. The most common used piece of PPE in this case will be face coverings. Face coverings, also known as face masks, are required when at work and recommended by the CDC as well. If you are providing a face cover for an employee, you have to make sure that it's a cloth face cover. If you are reimbursing employees for buying their own face cover, make sure you review California Labor Code Section 2802 to make sure you remain compliant. Employees can also submit receipts and or other proof that they've purchased face masks and be reimbursed for them as well. So when we look at face cloths or face coverings, we want to make sure that a face mask, the material, covers the nose and mouth and is secured around the head with ties or straps. They can be made from a variety of materials, including cotton, silk, and linen. A cotton or cloth face covering may be factory made or sewn by hand. It can be improvised with household items such as scarves, t-shirts, sweatshirts, or towels. The CDC has provided some great recommendations, again, on their website, which I'm going to show you here in a minute, on do-it-yourself face coverings. This one requires a little bit of work. It requires you to sew and use a needle and thread to construct it. The next example is also a do-it-yourself face covering. This one involves a t-shirt and scissors. You cut the lower portion of a t-shirt at an angle, and you're able to create a face covering that has a head and necktie. And the last example I'll show you, another do-it-yourself face covering, involves a bandana and rubber bands. Again, folded at an angle and incorporated rubber bands will allow this to be an adequate face covering, covering the nose and mouth. These do-it-yourself face covering examples are available on the CDC website, and there are also some great links to YouTube videos that will show you how to make these face coverings at home. As we continue to talk about face coverings, we need to ensure that employees are trained on how to wear a face covering properly. If an employee is going to be in an area with multiple coworkers, a face covering is required. Face coverings do not eliminate the need for physical distancing. It has to be a combination of both things in order for it to be effective. So the employee is wearing a face covering and they're also practicing social distancing or physical distancing. Face coverings should be cared for. They should be washed frequently, ideally daily. Laundered with detergent and hot water and dried on a hot cycle. We should also train employees to recognize when a face covering is no longer effective and when to discard it. When it no longer covers the nose and mouth, it should be discarded. When it's stretched out or damaged or the ties and straps no longer secure it to your face, it should be discarded. Whenever you see holes or tears in the fabric, that face covering should also be discarded. Let's talk about mitigation strategies. As we evaluate our workplaces for COVID-19 exposures, we have to reorganize our floor plans. This includes office areas and copy rooms, kitchen areas, break rooms, restrooms. All these are common areas that employees will access, and they need to be reimagined or reorganized. We also want to make sure that we communicate to any customers or visitors visiting your facility to practice physical distancing, minimum of 6 feet. You want to stagger workspaces or work areas or stations to make sure that physical distancing is possible. Reimagine common areas such as kitchens, break rooms, conference rooms, and restrooms. Minimize hangout areas. And if you do have hangout areas such as smoke areas, ensure that employees are practicing physical distancing. Post signs for workers to ensure that they are washing their hands with soap and water a minimum of 20 seconds before returning to work. And increase cleaning and disinfecting spaces frequently to ensure the elimination of transmission of infection. These are some examples that we can provide. As you can see, there are barriers that protect employees. On the left-hand side, you see a barrier set up in an office space, preventing the transmission of infection. And on the right-hand side, you see a production area where if these curtains were not up, the employees would be exposed or would not be practicing physical distancing. These curtains combined with a face covering will protect employees. In this example, we see on the left-hand side a lunchroom that's been reorganized. Employees are still using the space to take a break or a lunch break, and they are practicing physical distancing. The employer has removed the chairs from a table space and only allowed one employee to use one chair and one table. This keeps them 6 feet away and still allows them to enjoy their break. On the right-hand side, we see a urinal that's been blocked off. This will provide the physical distancing necessary for employees to remain safe when using the restroom. Moving on to compliance. As you very well know, California employers are required to establish an injury and illness prevention program, also known as your IIPP, found in Title 8, Section 3203 of the California Code of Regulations. And this program is to protect employees from workplace hazards. As we know, COVID-19 has now become an issue, and California OSHA requires employers to update their IIPPs accordingly. What is OSHA looking for? They're looking for an infection prevention procedure or measures included in your IIPP. This does not mean that you have to recreate your IIPP. You can add an addendum to your IIPP with COVID-19 procedures. You can also have a standalone program, also called an exposure prevention program, which would be a program that you would train your employees on also. Employee training is also important. OSHA wants to ensure that you are training your employees adequately and on COVID prevention measures. They will also look to make sure that you're providing wash facilities and sanitation stations as well for employees to wash their hands frequently. And last but not least, they're going to want to see some type of hazard assessment for personal protective equipment. This involves the employer assessing what PPE is necessary for a task or a work area. Along this compliance topic, I also want to address some questions that we have received for some of our clients. The first question is, can employers screen employees for COVID-19 by taking their temperatures? And the answer to that question is yes, they can. Again, this has to be performed under limited circumstances, and we have to ensure that we are reviewing the Department of Fair Employment and Housing guidelines and also the EEOC guidelines provided on the web. Employers should be aware that some employees with COVID-19 will not necessarily show a fever. So you may want to have other measures in place for assessing the symptoms of COVID-19. The next question asks, do employees maintain their privacy rights during a pandemic like COVID-19? The answer to the question is yes. Both federal and state law recognize that employees maintain certain rights in the workplace, including medical condition and personal health information. This means that if we have a reading of a high fever, we're not going to share that with the entire workforce, but we are going to let the employee know who has a fever that they need to seek medical care. So they're still protected, and the rights of their health information should still remain private. Of course, rights are not absolute, but they should be balanced against your company's legitimate business needs. The next question asks, how should employers take employees' temperatures? Testing should be administered in the least invasive way possible. You can utilize things like temperature guns or touchless thermometers, which are available and very inexpensive. The next question asks, do employers need employees' consent? But they need to provide a disclosure before taking their temperature. And the answer is no, you do not need to obtain consent for taking an employee's temperature during the COVID-19 pandemic, as long as the testing is not invasive. In California, we recommend that you post a notice of collection and also look at guidelines provided by the CCPA website to ensure that you're following all those guidelines and not violating any employee rights. So what information should be included in this notice? We should include what the information is being collected, what information is being collected, in this case, body temperature. We should also include the purpose for which we're collecting this information, and the purpose is to maintain a safe work environment. We encourage you to visit the website provided by the CDC, CalOSHA, and also CCPA to get better information and more up-to-date guidelines. We want to thank you for your time today, and we want to encourage you again to reach out to your broker and/or legal counsel if you have questions following this presentation.